Welcome, everyone. We're really happy to be here to kick off this week of presentations. I'm Karen. These are my teammates, Frank and Augusto. And as Pom said, the title of our thesis is Design and Decision Making, Backcasting Using Principles to Implement Cradle-to-Cradle. So what we're going to talk about today is we'll start by introducing the context of our research and talk about how we came to our hypothesis and our research questions that we've been exploring for the last 4 months. We'll talk about the methods, how we approach those ideas, and then we'll go into our results and share some of the key insights that we found and that we learned along the way. So what have we been doing for the last 4 months? Well, we came up with this following hypothesis that's way up in the corner here, and that's that backcasting using sustainability principles is supportive to the implementation of the cradle-to-cradle concept. And when we approached this hypothesis, it wasn't to prove or disprove it or support it. It was more to explore it and ask a lot of questions around it. So when we're talking about implementing cradle-to-cradle and how backcasting using principles could support it, it was how and why and when and in what way can it support that. So we looked at the following 3 research questions. Our first main question is how can an organization plan strategically towards the cradle-to-cradle concept? And when we're talking about the cradle-to-cradle concept, it's always within the context of sustainable development and looking at a transition from a linear way of designing our society to a more cyclical interaction within the biosphere. Because when we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about human society and how it can fit within the cycles of nature and be sustained over the long term. So our secondary research question around that is, how can the cradle-to-cradle concept be supportive to sustainable development? And that's from sort of a larger perspective, looking at society and the transition that needs to happen towards sustainability. And how does the cradle-to-cradle concept fit within that, and how can it support that transition? And our third question is, how can sustainable development, based on the cradle-to-cradle metaphor, optimally be implemented? So we looked at some first steps and ways that implementation can start, to start that transition towards sustainability. So what did we do to answer these questions and look at this hypothesis? Well, we started with some interviews. The place where the cradle-to-cradle concept is really taking off is in the Netherlands. It's been embraced by a lot of different leaders at different levels of society. So we started the thesis period with a trip to the Netherlands, and we interviewed a lot of different people over the course of a week, people working in government, in small businesses, and lots of decision makers at different levels. So we went there and got their perspectives on the cradle-to-cradle concept and what they're doing with it, and asked them about how the implementation was going to try and gain an understanding of where the challenges are and where our research could fit in. So we started with that, and then we came back here with lots of ideas and started delving into developing a theoretical framework. So that was the next stage. So those interviews, as well as literature review, fed into a theoretical framework that was heavily based on the 5-level framework. We looked at the cradle-to-cradle concept and FSSD at each of the 5 levels, and also the impressions that we'd gotten from the people that we were talking to, and looked at how that fit into strategy, system, and the different understandings of those levels. So we did that, and as we were working on that theoretical framework, we kept talking with people and did sort of an iterative process between theory and interviews and talking with people along the way. So from that initial work, what we did was we developed a tool. And this tool took on the form of a capacity tool in the form of a workshop that was designed specifically for people who are working with the cradle-to-cradle concept and how to frame that within sustainable development and help them to come up with first steps towards implementation from a sustainability perspective. And as we developed that tool, we tested it within a specific case study. So we went back to the Netherlands, this time to a province in the south of the Netherlands, which is the province of Limburg, where cradle-to-cradle activity is the most active. And we worked with people at the provincial government there, and we ran a workshop for people from the different departments who are working with cradle-to-cradle, and got their feedback on our workshop and our tool, and and fed that back into our work. So this is what we've been doing for the past few months, and now I'll pass it along to Freek, who will elaborate on some of our results.
Thank you, Karen. Hey. Cradle-to-cradle. What is cradle-to-cradle? When you look at our hypothesis, backcasting using sustainability principles is supportive to the implementation of the cradle-to-cradle concept. Then you have to know that cradle-to-cradle is a design concept. It is for design. It's about triggering people. It's about opening up their mind and just seeing the possibilities that there are for true innovation. That's what cradle-to-cradle is. And why did we look at cradle-to-cradle? Because we believe that cradle-to-cradle can be of value in transition from a linear take, make, waste perspective towards a more cyclical worldview. And cradle-to-cradle transition towards a more cyclical approach. The main tenet of cradle-to-cradle is waste equals food. So the waste of one production process acts as the food for the next production process, maybe for the same kind of product or for a product of the same quality. So you have no reduction in the quality of the product. That's the intention of the design, and that's how you approach it. That's the intention that you have with cradle-to-cradle. And the second tenet is that you use current solar income, and current solar income refers to energy from the sun, and it also refers to use of wind energy or the use of biomass as a source of energy, alternative energy sources, as opposed to the use of fossil fuels to fuel your economy. Use current solar income. And the third and last tenet of cradle-to-cradle is celebration of diversity. Cradle-to-cradle is about improving quality of life of those surrounding you, and it's also about protection of biodiversity, which is caught in celebration of diversity. And if you have those three tenets, what you recognize, it acts as a source of inspiration, but if you want to translate it in a more systems view of the world, then you need to make the translation. You need to make the translation if you want to work with planning. With cradle-to-cradle, you need to make a translation, so that's what we've been working on. And waste equals food, graphically represented by the biological cycle, biological metabolism, and the technical metabolism, the closed loops of waste equals food, and the use of current solar income, represented by the sun, and celebration of diversity. What you're then looking at is the flora and the fauna, and the fauna, so the trees and the bushes, we have them over here. And it's also about celebration of the diversity of the communities that you're acting in, the people that you're directly influencing or indirectly. And the best way that I could find to represent that is by two people holding hands. And you see that the connection, it shows a heart, so it's about, yeah. It's very good. And so, so it's beautiful, but we still don't have this systems view. So I want to put it in the context of a complex system. So what happens then is that you take the biological metabolism. And what we know is that the technosphere is part, well, society within nature, and the technosphere, technical metabolism, is a product of our society. So this technical metabolism, which we aim to have closed loops, make waste equal food, is inherently part of the biological metabolism. And this biological metabolism is fueled by energy from the sun. What happens? You have, on the one hand, photosynthesis. And on the other hand, what you have is respiration. So we have waste equals food, current solar income, celebrate diversity in communities, technical metabolism created by society. So I just put society here. And it is us.